Hey, we are here in the Fine Woodworking podcast room at the interview table, whatever you want to call it. And we're talking with Brian Boggs of Brian Boggs fame, obviously, and the Ask Brian Boggs show. Boggs Furniture Makers. What's the name of your business?
Brian Boggs Chairmakers.
Brian Boggs Chairmakers, yes. But you make way more than chairs.
Well, you got to. It's kind of the flip side of Thomas Moser cabinet makers. They don't make just cabinets.
There you go.
I started out making just chairs and added things over time as clients asked, and just never saw fit to change the name. I think I really like the name Chairmakers because to me, if you can make a chair, you got the rest of it covered.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. It is one of the more challenging things I've ever done in my life, and it was making a chair of your design.
And live to tell about it.
Yes. Now we'll see if I can make the second one. The first one, with the help of others, was very doable in a class situation, but the second one, I don't know. I'm probably going to be calling David and Jeff for some help.
Do you have all the jigs and fixtures?
That's my next that's my next step.
Okay.
There, you can purchase the jigs from them, or I'm gonna start from scratch, and I hope to in the next month get going building jigs, and then I might make a little stool to ease my way back into it, but with the same rake and splay angles. So we'll see. But that kind of brings up my first question, is that you are primarily known as a chair maker. And you don't have anything on your chairs. There's no straight square surface normally. There's nothing very rectilinear about your designs.
Right.
Is that purely aesthetic, or I've always caught the vibe that some of that might be challenge driven for you and keeping it interesting for you as a craftsman as well. Or is it purely aesthetics?
Well, it's not purely any one thing, except it's purely being inspired to do something that just comes to me. Mm-hmm. When I started out reading John Alexander's book, and before that Krenov's books, I was really sucked in. I wasn't just interested in that, and this looks difficult, so why don't I do it? Mm-hmm. It was that I felt physically, or at least psychologically, sucked in a way that there wasn't any coming back out. And I have maintained an infatuation with the sculptural form of what chairs can be and what I think they should be. And it's just, there's nothing else in the furniture arena that attracts me that way.
So for you, something like, because you have an outdoor furniture line, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it has hints of an Adirondack style. It has hints of even there's some Maloof elements. So there's a lot of sculpted elements to it, and so but there's so many. As a craftsman, there's so many challenges involved in styles like that. Do you find yourself being driven by figuring out how to do something that you don't know how to do, or at this point is it all in the bag of tricks for Brian Boggs?
No, in fact, I'm redesigning the ladder back chair now, and I don't know how to do it, and I haven't figured out how to make the back leg yet.
Really?
And I haven't figured out how to make the back slat yet.
Really?
It's a ladder back chair that is simple in its form, but beyond my capability currently to build. And I'm not attracted to that because it opens my envelope. It's just that what I keep being drawn to opens my envelope. Uh-huh. And that's what keeps me excited about it. That's what keeps me tired. But it's what makes it. I'm more excited about what I'm doing now than I ever was, in part because what I'm doing is so much more cutting edge. I'm really breaking ground on doing things that I've never heard of being done. The joinery that we're doing now, for the most part, I don't think it's ever been done.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't like to think that it's an ego thing at all about that. It's just that the reason that I'm making chairs is that I want to make a difference. I want to make something that's worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I study it and the more I break things and try to discover what's happening in each of the things that I do, the more new ideas come in. And those are sometimes ideas I don't understand, or certainly don't understand how to do. And I can't just go ask somebody how to do it because they haven't done it either.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of stuff is what keeps me alive, at a level. I mean, I'm not going to die if I don't do it, but it's just there's something about a level of living that just keeps you vibrating, and it's a buzz,
Do you always try and keep one? I find that I try and keep one problem in my head. It might not be at the front of my thought, but when I lay my head on that pillow at night, I start thinking about how am I going to make that, or how what is the next step of this. Are you able to turn it off?
Not always. But there's you're describing something very similar to what happens to me, and sometimes that's exactly what's happening to me. And the biggest challenge is to not think about it, but to listen to it. And that's where inspired designs come from. It's not me projecting myself at something. It's me hearing something coming in. And the better I get at listening, the cleaner it comes in and the less I screw it up.
That's really
And it doesn't always come in a form that's familiar. And that's why I have been designing new types of joinery and developing techniques I've never seen or heard of before. It's not because, let me break new ground. It's, last night when I woke up at 3:00, this thing came in and it wants to happen. So how do I make it happen? It's kind of like you're walking down the street and this little cat comes up and starts rubbing against your leg and it wants to go home with you. Well, you can't kick it out in the street, You're going to pick it up and take it home with you. Well, that's kind of the way the designs come in. They just rub up against me and I can't kick them out in the street. So I got to take care of them, and taking care of them means listening to them, finding out what they need to be and nurturing their development. And that drives my development and the whole development of the infrastructure of this company.
So do you keep a sketchbook around? How are these transpiring from?
I have a pile of sketchbooks because I keep forgetting to take one with me, and then I have to buy one. I said, Melanie, we got to go in the store over here. I know we're in Miami or somewhere, and we've got to go buy another sketchbook. So I don't know how many of them now.
That'd be fun to thumb through those pages one day. But
it is fun, but there's a lot of repeated forms, and those forms I will draw again, not because I'm drawing a new idea, but it gives me a format for allowing new ideas to land.
Okay.
And when I think about it that way, it's easier for the designs to genuinely be inspired. If I just put down everything that I make that's seating does have a common set of lines.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because those are the lines that touch our bodies, and we don't change shape when we change chairs.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to maintain that. And so those keep showing up, and then I just find different ways of, or just ideas just come in sometimes. Sometimes a client asks for something, and then I have to at least go through my inventory of ideas to see if it's already there. That's the quickest thing to do. And often, because I've got so many sketchbooks of different, almost always just gesture drawings, where I capture a concept of something and then it can't really go anywhere because I don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. Or it doesn't fit in, or it's too complicated for what's going on in the company right now, or a host of reasons that mean its time isn't yet. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's because it isn't complete. The other piece of it can't come in because I've got no reference for it to land on. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know how to do or anything about, if you don't know anything about mortise and tenon joinery, designs that require really highly precise mortise and tenon joinery are probably not going to come to you. They're going to go to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get ideas, or you're going to hear ideas or listen to ideas that fit where you are. And the further our infrastructure and my vocabulary expands, the broader a base I have for new ideas to land. And that's kind of what allows, drives, or incubates the development of our company, which is ultimately designed to be an infrastructure for inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to create an environment that perpetuates, encourages, and fosters the inspiration of people working here, but also my own, and ultimately clients. And when people come here, that's a word that comes up a lot from them, not me. And all of that, when it's sort of designed into infrastructure, that really helps free the imagination. And that's key. And that's not about thinking. That's not about laying in bed at night and trying to solve a problem. That's laying in bed at night, listening to what's coming in.
Being open, finding,
Right.
setting yourself up to also have the time to listen to, because if you're going all the time, if you're working, in the shop on joinery all the time, you're not going to have the time to be open and listen to those ideas. So that's
right.
That's interesting. We're talking about design and everything, and one thing that ever since I heard about your Sonos chair, I've always kind of been obsessed with the idea of it's a chair that's specifically made for guitar makers. And the first time I heard that, or not guitar makers, for guitar players. The first time I heard that, I was, are you kidding me? Why? And then
it's the big market, right?
yeah. It's pretty focused right there. But at the time, I was a recording engineer, and I knew session players who would bring a folding chair in to the studio with them because that was the chair that they were comfortable in. And I thought, wow, so here's this guy in Asheville who's making a chair dedicated to this, but the balance that I thought would be really, really difficult to strike would be it's such a focused idea for a chair. Was it hard to find the balance between form and function? Because it's a beautiful chair. It's a striking chair. It's a chair that you would easily see on stage at the Met. But
yeah, well, the specificity of that chair made it interesting, but it's not that specific because guitar players are humans too. And they're not built that different than us, and they don't sit that different than us. There were things like, the back can't be so big that you bang your guitar on it.
okay, yeah.
There was another challenge in that it cannot make any noise.
Yeah.
So no padding. Padding makes noise because if you're recording when you're playing, that's not cool. That's not going to work. And it had to be comfortable for hours of practice, teaching, or performing. And so that just really upped the game for what we were already doing, which was trying to find the ideal form for seating, for entertaining guests at the table, sitting in long hours at your desk working, or in this case playing a musical instrument. And it was a pretty fortunate situation because Paul Huemiller came to us with this idea. He was the owner and is the owner of Dream Guitars here in Weaverville. Here, this is Asheville. Weaverville is just outside of Asheville. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't just, here's an idea, go make one and see if you can sell it. Here's an idea, we want some, and we want to carry it in our store. I said, okay, you have my attention.
Yeah.
So it took years to develop it, and I'm not sure that we're done because we get feedback from musicians that impacts the shape of the seat or back or sizes or whatever, and we still customize them. But that whole project wasn't a new challenge. It was a new level of challenge, and we had a very focused audience. And it's been a lot of fun, frankly. We've met a lot of really interesting musicians. It's helped us meet clients that we wouldn't have otherwise met. And it's certainly upped our game in terms of understanding ergonomics and led to what's currently maybe our best dining chair. I'm not sure, but it led to the development of the Lily chair, which the armchair version of which last year won the Good Design Award, which was a big deal.
We had a post on the website about that, and I did think that they looked of the same hand. So how many prototypes do you go through for design? Because I mean, you can't knock out chair prototypes quickly.
No, I make a model and then I do a mock-up, and I can do those fairly quickly because I don't do whole joinery. I just screw it together.
Okay.
But there was one initial prototype, and then, or I guess that would probably be a mock-up and then a prototype, and then we started making them, and they evolved over time. And that's the way most of my work does, because it's really in the making of things that I begin to really understand what it is and what it needs and how to make it what it is better. And that's where I start to see more clearly the form, which is the function. I don't believe that form follows function. I think that form is the function. Okay. Or ideally, form follows inspiration. If you look at history designs through time, or through history, they're all doing the same thing. They're getting your butt off the floor. And some even attempt to make you comfortable. Some don't bother with that. But their form is so varied that even though they're all trying to serve the same function, the form is following the imagination of the person, which is influenced by their culture and by their values and by the market that it was built in. And so I think we need to start looking at form a little bit differently and recognizing that that's where the meaning of the piece is. So you might say that form follows meaning. And in a lot of situations, if you're looking at historical chairs, they were a reflection of values.
Okay. Yep.
And culture. And that's what was meaningful to those who were buying them because of what it reflected about them. And what we do is no different, but it reflects a different set of values. It's in a different time, and it's ultimately made with a different intention than a lot of furniture is. And at best, it's honest and it's inspired.
Wow. So that's pretty heavy for.
Well, I mean,
but it's incredible because for you it's obvious, but that was a progression too for you. I mean, you weren't always, or were you? Were you always that open with your processes, and were you always that open to figuring things out and learning things from the form or from the function and finding that balance or lack thereof sometimes? But
from the very beginning, and that's, I didn't have a lot to go on. I just had John Alexander's book, which was great for a start, but everything evolved through an immersion, and out of that immersion, perspectives were developed, not just designs, an understanding of why I was doing this in the moment, and that why has evolved over time as well.
So now let's switch to something that is, in my mind, purely function. That's something that you've done for a very long time, and that's design and make tools and items that chair makers use. So, I mean, if you think of shaving horses, one of the first ones that comes to my mind is your shaving horse. And It's funny, you see it in chair shops, in just about every chair shop I go to now, where it's like if somebody new to woodworking were to be told to draw a shaving horse, it's likely that they would draw a Boggs shaving horse, you know. And the same goes with spoke shaves, and these items are purely function. Is that just as inspiring to you to to tweak the design of a spoke shave to work as smoothly as your shaves do?
Absolutely, it is. And it's very important to me what they look like,
Okay.
not just how sharp they stay and how they control the chip, but how they feel in my hand and how they connect me with the work. And the idea with the spoke shaves is that when I hold it in my hand, it almost doesn't matter which way I work my hand, that spoke shave will make a balanced cut. And it gets things out of the way. A poorly designed tool. In fact, I had to learn to use hand tools using tools that were poorly designed. And the impediment to learning was primarily getting around the design issues that caused a blade to rattle, or the handle wasn't fitted so that the tool balanced right. So there's a disconnect between what you're trying to learn and what you're trying to do. So the idea was to get rid of that and get rid of everything that was in the way of your experience with cutting the wood and just have a connection.
I mean, so the spoke shave is a beautiful example, because just the other day on Instagram, somebody had posted and said, I just got a spoke shave. I'm having a hard time with it. And I believe they had, an old Stanley 52 or something, or a record. And I mean, talk about a design of a tool that it tells you to use it improperly. When your hands grab the handles, you're using it fairly improperly. And I immediately replied, go on the website, watch Brian's video on on holding a spoke shave. But your shaves, any which way you grab that tool, it kind of forces your hand naturally into supporting the blade properly, and it forces you to get a good cut. Whereas some of the older shaves, not so much. So, I mean, was that out of frustration for you?
I had a lot of frustration early on in trying to understand spoke shaves. I had my first spoke shave, my grandfather bought me because I didn't have the $12 it required to buy a new Kuntz spoke shave. And it's got to be the worst spoke shave on the planet. It was a double-bladed kind, and when you're using one blade, there's so much vibration in the tool that the other blade creeps down and cuts your finger.
So there's two depths or something?
No, it was a double-bladed tool. If you look at antique stores, you'll see them sometimes. One was a curved blade, a concave blade, and there was a straight blade. And the idea was efficiency, but they were horrible things. And I ended up replacing the blade and replacing the cap and totally rechanging the body, and realized, well, I can't fix the fact that it's really out of balance. And so that's when I started making my own. And that was within the first couple of years I was making my own spoke shaves. It's because there wasn't a good one to be found. So I'm still doing that in a different place. I've built a machine that we use to carve our seats with. It's a hand cranked router copy machine.
There was a post, I believe Kevin posted to Instagram a story of it yesterday, and I was alone in the office and I wanted to run around.
No, I saw him back there. I didn't know he was up to. But yeah, that was Noah, I think, wasn't it, Kevin, on the carving machine? You were shooting Noah.
Yeah. But it's hopefully the post. Tell Kevin to highlight it or something so that people can go
he's
back
right here
and looking on the stories, because it's it's an incredible piece.
So right beside that is another machine that I developed for cutting all of our tenons, and so we can cut tenons quickly and really accurately. I haven't found a machine on the market that does it as fast or as accurately, and we're doing 1.25 inch length tenons in one full plunge, twice around, and we're done. And they're within 1,000th. And we can do tapers or compound angles or whatever we want to do. That, that's a machine that actually I've considered developing for market. I think there's a lot of need for it, but what's kept me from doing that is I think it's going to be expensive. And people are mostly fairly happy with the multi-router.
Yeah. How much extruded aluminum do you guys go through a year?
Well, I don't buy a lot of it because I can cannibalize a machine.
Okay.
And there's stuff it's already a lot of times has holes in the right place, or you can move because it's a sliding T-slot, but you can move the hole. So I've got parts I've reused, a dozen times or more, and they look like it.
Well, it works. So you had just mentioned, milling your tenons to within 1,000th of an inch. And I mean, I always think of precision operations when I think of your methods. And then I started looking into how you sharpen, and I've adopted your sharpening method that you had written an article about in the magazine some years back. And you sharpen freehand. Are you still sharpening free? Because it's like for anyone that would measure a tenon to the 1,000th of an inch to not use a honing guide, it just didn't make sense to me. But
yeah. Well, there's a lot of tools that I have that really don't work well with a guide. All of my knives have to be sharpened freehand. There's not a good gauge to use, and especially true for the draw knife. Now, Pete Galbert did make a really nice jig for sharpening a draw knife, and I own one, and I have used it. What tends to happen is I will use a guide for a while, and it actually informs my eye and helps me get better at hand sharpening.
Okay. And
I'll go back and forth, sometimes with a lot of inconsistency, and sometimes I just really would rather sharpen it by hand at the moment. I have a number 8 plane, which is my favorite plane. It's a Lee Nielsen number 8. The blade doesn't fit in the guide we have, so I just always sharpen it by hand. And I want to maintain those skills because I have to have those skills to sharpen my draw knife and carving knives. So it's not that I choose to not use a guide. It's that I need to have those freehand honing skills to sharpen the full kit. And, I sharpen my drill bits too. And I don't know how to use a guide for those. There are some guides out there, but I use angles that they don't offer.
Okay. So I have taken, like we had talked about, I have taken a Boggs chair class, and I didn't know how many of the methods were your methods and how many were Jeff Lefkowitz's or David DeYard's who were teaching the class. But I was thrilled by the fact that we were measuring the backslat tenons with a set of with a dial caliper to the 1,000th, and then trimming it with a Sloyd knife. Are you using Sloyd knives and knives like that in your work a lot still? Because you had just mentioned your carving knives. So
yes, for my ladder back chairs, all of my ladder back chairs, I always would carve the width of the tenon with a knife, and I've gotten to where the mortises are coming out within 1,000th or 2 anyway, so I can thickness sand the slats to within a few thousandths of a fit. So more recently, it's just been a little bit of sanding that it takes to get them to fit just right. But even just last year, I was mostly using a hand plane cross grain, just like Jeff does. He uses the same method that I taught him. So it's not a slow method. I mean, it would only take to scrape the surface of a slat to ready for a 320 grit and have both tenons fitted to the tolerances you're talking about was generally about 10 minutes. I would do a 3-slat chair in a half hour or so. So those tenons don't really machine to a fit. You can't. The part itself is too irregular to because it's steam bent. So you just get fast at that, and it's not. And I've taught enough of my employees how to do that to see that it's a reasonable human endeavor to hit that precision with a hand plane. And I think that the reason that it's fairly simple for my employees to do that is nobody told them it was hard.
Okay.
You know, I think that when you talk in thousandths like that, those are scary numbers if you're not familiar with measuring them. But a caliper on a dial caliper, the thousandths increments are almost a 16th of an inch apart. So you can see a thousandth on a caliper as easy as you can see a 16th on a ruler. And once you start getting used to it, I mean, I've had employees that can set up a bandsaw fence by eye within 5 thousandths. That's not me, that's my employees.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of calibrating your thinking. And it's not an eye. It's not having a better eye than another person. It's calibrating, it's training your thinking, because your eyes seeing the same thing. It's what your brain does with what is taken in and what you judge it with, what you judge it by. You just get used to it, and it's not that hard to see.
Wow. All right. So, but it's absolutely true, because I remember when I was building that chair, and we broke out the dial calipers. I was like, oh no, here we go. This is gonna be horrible. This is awful. And it blew me away by how long it took with a hand plane, or not how long it took. That sounds like a negative, but how much sneaking up I could do with a hand plane to take 3 thousandths off. I mean, if I was careful and I concentrated, that was not an impossible task. It's just a matter of doing it once to learn, every swipe with a hand plane is about 1 thou maybe, and take it from there, But so let me ask you about teaching, because you used to teach a lot of classes.
I did, and I loved teaching and still love teaching. I've taught at a bunch of different schools around the country, Mark Adams School and Peter Korn's place up the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Maine, and Gary Rogalski's place in, the Northwest Woodworking Studio. And I got a lot of satisfaction from teaching people a different way of looking at woodworking and how to think about angles and organic forms less rigidly, and to step out of their linear thinking about how parts relate to each other in a piece of furniture. And I still, I remember fondly a lot of those experiences. But I don't want to do that exactly again. I think you've seen how well Jeff Lefkowitz and David Duarte are doing with their classes, and I'm mighty proud of them. I don't think I could teach that class as well as they do, because I don't work like that anymore. The work that we're doing here and the work that I'm designed to do, people aren't going to do in their garage. And that was the primary student that was coming up there. It wasn't the professional in development. It was the hobbyist looking to do something fun. And what I love now in my teaching is that I'm teaching employees who are going to spend their career doing this. And when they learn something, it's an advancement in their career in a way. And that's very satisfying. And in providing the infrastructure that supports all that, we get to see that develop over a long period of time. So, and the other thing that's different now is we've got the Ask Brian Boggs show, which is instructional, and the articles coming up on Get Your Curve On with Fine Woodworking. It's a series of articles that gives a lot broader group of people. A lot more people have access to that couldn't afford the classes.
Yeah.
And I think that most of the woodworkers who are going to become professionals are not able to take those classes because they're just too expensive.
Yeah.
So I like the way that my instruction is coming across now, and we'll be doing more and more of it.
So tell me about what you're hoping to do with the Ask Brian Boggs show going forward.
Well, that's where people are, they're writing in or calling in with questions, and then we try to answer all of them. We don't get to answer all the questions.
I can attest it's very difficult to do, to answer all of them. Yes.
It is, but there's also a lot of crossover, and I can answer sometimes 3 questions in the response to one. Something that interesting coming up too is we have chairmakers.com as a website, and that's where we promote it and still sell our shaving horse plans. But the ladder back chair, which is the one that I don't know which ladder back you took a class
I did
with,
the basic.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that basic chair is what I'm most known for, and we're going to be releasing that whole series of designs to the public.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm going to stop making those. I'm going to make a different chair that nobody else is going to want to make anyway.
You have thrown down the gauntlet for yourself. Okay.
Yeah. So it's time for, it's kind of like having kids. There's, at some points it's time to kick them out of the house.
Okay.
So this is the first time that we've announced this publicly, and it's a pretty new thing. So what we'll be doing is there'll be a form on chairmakers.com where people can fill that out, and we'll let them know as soon as we have this ready. But we're, already Jeff and David are teaching the classes, but now we're encouraging people to make these for sale. It's just a way of supporting the development of that in other people's shops, and I'm letting go of it.
Wow.
So,
okay.
I think it's going to be a big deal because so many people wanted to make this chair. We're going to make it easier for them to do it.
That's fantastic.
And it's through chairmakers.com is where they'll find information on that.
And there will be plans.
There will be plans, books, videos. I'm hoping to do smaller tutorial videos. We may even do webinars. We haven't got it all planned out yet. But it will be an ongoing support for anybody wanting to make the ladder back, from the side chairs, the armchairs, the bar stools, the rocking chairs, the whole kit.
Okay. Sign me up first.
So, okay. No, you've got to sign up. You go to chairmakers.com, fill out the form.
Absolutely.
And be the first to do so.
Yes, I'm right here. That's awesome, and it's very generous of you to give back that way. I mean, I know that you learned from John Alexander and his book, but you elevated it from there, and who knows where someone else is going to take it from here, or actually
I'm excited to see what happens. And with the encouragement to make these, no matter how you're doing it, whether you're doing it as an avocation or as a vocation, and selling these to customers, having that encouragement, kind of an endorsement from us, I'm hoping will jumpstart its evolution and certainly the availability of that chair. So,
well, fantastic. Well, Brian, thank you so much for coming and jumping on Skype and hanging out with us for
it's been fun
for a little bit, and a lot of exciting stuff coming up. And anybody who, I'm sure everybody that's been listening has just signed up at chairmakers.com. And but I can attest, follow Brian Boggs Chairmakers on Instagram. It's a fantastic follow. Is there any other place that we need to keep an eye out?
We have Facebook. How active are we on Facebook now? That's still going on, isn't it, Kevin? Yeah.
You can catch stuff on Facebook. Chairmakers, Brian Boggs Chairmakers.
Okay.
Yeah, Brian Boggs Chairmakers at Facebook.
Awesome. We'll post links to all of that in the show notes below. But again, thank you, Brian, and we'll be seeing a lot more of you in the future.
All right, Ben. Good talking with you.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye.